Now, job shares are pretty common these days for doctors, teachers, even judges, but not for MPs, and it looks set to stay that way. The High Court in London has turned down an application from two Green Party members who hope to stand together on a joint ticket. The women argued that the current ban breaches equality laws, but they were told it wasn't a matter for the court. Well, just before we came on air, I spoke to one of the women who took the case, Sarah Cope. A lot of people will not have thought of the idea of MPs job sharing. Explain to us what you think the advantages would be.
Well, at the minute, we obviously know that Parliament is not representative of the population at large. For example, we've got over 450 MPs are men of the 650. We've got a handful of people with disabilities, when if it was representative of the population at large, there'd be about 65 people with disabilities representing us as MPs. And we think that if job-sharing MPs were allowed, it would mean that Parliament was opened up to a lot of people for whom at the minute they're effectively barred from standing because they know that they would not be able to do the job full time.
But it would still be an enormous commitment getting up and down to London from the constituency, trying to stay across all of the issues. Do you think you really could spend half your time being an MP?
I think if you went into partnership with the right person, and obviously you'd have to be very mindful of that when you were deciding, you know, who to stand on a joint ticket with, it would very much be a matter of being with someone who you knew that you could depend upon, who you could cooperate with, communicate with, and could share the work with effectively. I guess you'd get to know that during the election campaign or perhaps during selection period. So I think it could work. It would mean that people would have to take those things into consideration, but it happens in other sectors. It happens across the private and the public sector that people can job share, including now High Court judges. So I think if they can do it, I think it's probably good enough for MPs.
Except there's a fundamental difference with an MP, which is that connection with your constituents. Somebody puts themselves up for election and the voters decide whether or not to vote for them on the basis largely of who that person is as well as the party. If you've got two people there, what if you liked one of them but didn't like the other? You wouldn't know which way to cast your ballot.
Well, I think a lot of the time people do have that problem, don't they? They don't particularly like the candidate, but they like the party, or perhaps the other way around. But in this case, you'd have twice the chance of liking the person, so you'd have at least one that you liked, hopefully two, and they'd be having a shared political vision, let's not forget. It's not like people from the ends of a political spectrum within a certain party would be able to stand together. It simply wouldn't work.
Except that people do have different opinions about things. You can't even tell everything that's going to come up during the course of a parliament. How would I know that one of my representatives, if I had two MPs who were job sharing in my constituency, were going to vote the way I wanted them to? It would depend whether the vote was on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, which one of them was in Parliament on any given day.
Well, that brings up the voting issue, of course, and that could work in one or two ways. You could have it that the two job share MPs had half a vote each, so that they could cast them independently, or they could have the one vote between them and only agree to vote if they agreed on how they should cast it and abstain otherwise. But let's not forget that most votes are in fact whipped, and they would be speaking to the same manifesto, and as I said, would be there because they had a shared political vision.
It's not unknown for MPs to misbehave a little bit and get themselves in trouble. Voters then have the chance to vote them out of office at the next election. If one of these two MPs did something wrong, you represented me and I wanted to vote against you, but I really admired and respected the work the other one had done during the course of that parliament, that would leave voters in an impossible position.
Well, it would leave voters with a decision they would have to make, but we think that voters should be allowed to make that decision. We think it should be down to the voters themselves and that they've got the intelligence to make the decision. But if someone had not behaved, as you say, I don't think they'd probably get reselected to stand, so that wouldn't actually be an issue.
Now, you lost in court. What happens next with your campaign to allow MPs to job share?
So we were told by the judge that he was very sympathetic to our case, actually, which we were really pleased to see. He said, you know, it's an important issue, one that shouldn't go away and one that Parliament should deal with. So it's back to Parliament, really. In 2012, John McDonnell MP took a private member's bill, in fact, on this very issue to get job share MPs. It didn't win, but we've had a sea change within Parliament since then. The last election, for example, all those new SNP MPs coming in saying, this isn't the way that this place should be run. You know, we'd hope that they'd be on our side at least.
All right, well, we'll see what happens. Thanks very much for talking to us tonight.
Thank you.
That was Sarah Cope talking to me a little earlier.